Hi, this is Paul Roberts from Sniff and the Tears, and you're listening to Retrospectives with John Broughton on KC Radio 97.7 FM.
I believe both of your parents were artists, is that right?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
So I guess that's where your initial interest in art came from. What about your initial interest in making music? Where did that come from?
Probably the same as everybody. I mean, I just sort of, as a teenager, I was just really into music. And then a friend of mine had bought a guitar and tried to learn it but didn't get very far and said, did I want his guitar? So he sold it to me for £5. And I think that was the start, really. So.
Has there ever been a time in your life where you've been torn between the two creative outlets and you felt like you might have been? Yeah.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I'm sort of constantly torn, really. I mean, more in terms of, just if you're into something, a particular project, then whatever it is, whether it's music or painting, then it's very difficult to combine the two. So, I kind of oscillate between the two, really. And I always have done, I mean, I like both, but music is something I can't really put to one side very easily. So I listen to music while I'm painting,
So by the same token, do they help each other? Does being a musician help make you a better artist and vice versa?
I don't think so. I mean, in a sense, it's always been more of a conflict because, I mean, it would be better for me, I think, really, if I could just concentrate on one and just completely dedicate myself to that. But I've never been able to do that, so so I've ended up having to kind of juggle the two, really.
Going back to those early days musically, you had an initial record deal with a French record label. Do you remember holding any great hopes for what would transpire from that?
Well, you never really know. I mean, it's sort of, in a way I had, it was one of those things. I was living in France at the time, in Paris, and I was introduced to this guy who seemed a very nice guy and had a good approach to things. But unfortunately, he just disappeared very shortly afterwards, and somebody else took over. So, yeah, I mean, it was interesting, and I thought at the time, yeah, I'll give it a go, And he, I think what happened was, he sort of made some demos which he wanted to play to Jerry Moss of A&M Records, which he then proceeded to do, but Jerry Moss apparently said that he wanted to sign me directly, and this guy said no, it would have to go through him. So that was the end of that one, and that really kind of put the kibosh on it. And I then went back to London and sort of forgot about it. I mean, there was a single came out in France. Didn't do very much. I think I did a couple of TV shows. That was about it, really.
You were thereabouts in that London pub rock scene of the 70s. It sounds like an exciting musical community to be a part of. What are your fondest memories of that time?
Oh, it was a great time. I mean, it was a time. I mean, the nice thing about that sort of pub scene, was that it was a bit of a community. People went from one venue to another, so it was a good little platform for new bands. Just to sort of get out and give it a go. And yeah, I mean, we sort of had a few residencies, and it was quite a nice sort of way of performing. That whole sort of pub thing I did before I went to France, in fact. So it wasn't really when I got back from France. The punk thing had just happened, so it was long before all that.
One way where you were able to combine your art talents with your music talents was doing the album cover work on the Sniff and the Tears albums. Was that pretty important to you to be part of that?
Not really. I mean, the way that came about really was that I think, the way that things go, it was seen as a good, apart from anything else, as a sort of publicity thing. So the fact that I'd done the album covers, was something that I suppose they thought would be good for promotion. I didn't really set out with the intention of I must do the cover. I hadn't really thought about it. When it was suggested, I thought, well, okay, why not?
Now, both the world of music and the world of art, I guess, no doubt have a business side to them, which I guess can be difficult for a creative person to deal with. Which has given you the most grief over the years, the business side of art or the business side of music?
Business side of music, I think, is more difficult. They're both businesses, and in that sense, there's always going to be a conflict because, I know from my point of view as an artist or as a musician, my main pleasure in doing it is just doing it for its own sake, I just enjoy doing it. What happens to it afterwards, that's when it becomes problematic, So, because other people get involved, and of course, when other people are involved, they want things to go a certain way. They want, they want you to conform to certain things and so on, models, whatever's happening at the time, and that was difficult. That was sort of problematic because I think musically as a band we were quite difficult to categorize, especially in that little era, So we didn't fit into any kind of fashionable templates which could be easily exploited. So I think it was, that I would say was a little difficult. And the same goes for art, because fashion rules in most things. If something's fashionable or it's in vogue at the time, then that's what people want. From the business side, conformity is everything,
Have you ever sat down and pondered which direction or how your career as an artist may have gone had Sniff and the Tears never happened?
Well, no, I couldn't really speculate. It's very hard to say. And obviously, Sniff and the Tears took me away from the sort of career path. So in that sense, who knows? I don't really know. I think with anything, whether doing music or painting, obviously it's good if you dedicate your time and effort to the one thing. Success is very much based on application, dedication, and bloody hard work. So
yeah.
So it's difficult if you're trying to do two things, obviously. But so I don't really know. It's hard to say. I certainly lost some. Because in the 70s, just before the band took off, I was selling, very well. So, my paintings were selling incredibly well. So that sort of put a stop to that because suddenly I was having to concentrate completely on the music. Because of the demands of the music business, you have to get out, you have to tour, you have to record, write songs, so on.
I guess it would be difficult for any interviewer talking to you and not have the subject of the song Driver's Seat come up. Tell us about the effect that it had on you personally, the success of the song, and did its success surprise you at the time?
Certainly surprised me, yeah, because I hadn't written it as a commercial proposition. It wasn't that sort of song. So I was very surprised, but very pleasantly surprised, I have to say. So yeah.
So even after the recording process, you didn't see the commercial potential of it?
Well, people did. I mean, certainly when we started to play it to people, people were saying that sounds like a single. That's the single. It was very much it was very much jumped on as being a commercial possibility. And I was just surprised because I sort of, in my thinking processes, the commercial proposition is sort of sugar by the Archies, so, and it didn't really conform to that.
No. I believe, though, it wasn't as successful at home there in England as it was elsewhere in the world.
No, well, strange. I mean, I don't know. I think at that time the sort of the British marketplace was torn between, on the one side, the sort of the kind of very commercial pop side of things, and also the sort of the kind of the post-punk and all that kind of thing that was going on in the more fashionable sort of side of music. But there was a problem. I know we did Top of the Pops, and there was a strike in the EMI pressing plant the week after, and so you couldn't actually buy the record for 3 weeks after we appeared on Top of the Pops, which was not good.
No.
So we did slightly miss an opportunity there, but yeah, I mean it wasn't as successful as it was in other places, certainly.
It found another life years later for its use in television commercials. A lot of artists are quite strong in not wanting their songs used in that way. Were you caught in any such dilemma at the time?
No, not really. I think I don't mind. I mean, to me, the song stands up for itself. I don't think it's seen. When you hear it, you don't think, well, it's being used in an exploitative manner, So, and as long as they pay me some money, I don't mind.
It's aged really well too. It doesn't sound like a dated production at all.
No, well, I would hope not. I really would hope not, because to me, the music I like best is not the kind of music that sounds that aged either, So I think good music should stand on its own. It doesn't need to be because something that sounds aged tends to mirror the sort of production values or the sort of particular ethos of some particular time, which tends to be on the more commercial side of things, I think. And if the music's got integrity, then I think it's going to stand the test of time. I think certainly say that about most of the stuff I listen to anyway.
Yeah. After the song's success, did you come under any record company pressure to come up with another driver's seat for one of the?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. No, I remember we went to our American tour. We were Atlantic Records in America, and we're sitting around a sort of some welcoming party, and I was sort of being asked by everybody, so Paul, when are you going to write another driver's seat? It's just that's the pressure. They want the same thing again. I mean, it's not something I've ever sort of. I don't even understand the question. How can you write another song the same as the last one?
That's right. Yeah. You say the band was difficult to categorise, and just over the last few days, reading through some old articles and reviews of the band, I was surprised to find quite a few comparisons to Dire Straits, which I couldn't see at the time. Was that something you could see at the time?
No, I could never see it at the time. It was a curious thing. I mean, I think the only thing I can think is that perhaps Dire Straits were a sort of a similar kind of anomaly. In the sort of climate of the time musically, it was a sort of bunch of musicians who wanted to play music and not particularly kind of get out there and poker themselves into oblivion. I don't know, but I mean, it was quite interesting. One of the things that happened was that we recorded the album Fickle Heart, and it was delayed. The release was delayed because Chiswick, who are our record company, had to change their distributor from, I think, Anchor to EMI or something, and it took about a year to negotiate. So the album was just sitting sitting around for a year. And actually, when we mastered the record, just after mastering it, we came out and was in Wardour Street with, I was with the guitarist Mick Deitch, and we ran into Pick Withers, who was the drummer with Dire Straits at the time. And he said, we were sort of exchanging notes, and he said, we're sort of about halfway through our album, and we'd already mastered ours. Yet the curious thing was, of course, when their album came out before ours because of this whole business, and then suddenly all the press was saying, oh, a bit like Dire Straits, So it was a sort of just one of those things,
Yeah. Considering you had that early commercial success outside of England, in America, was there a distinct push by management to pursue the American market more so than home?
Yes, there was, and that was sort of. In fact, we ended up being signed. We signed to an American manager who sort of pursued us, and in fact, all the interest in terms of management came from America, not from Britain. So we ended up signing to Bud Prager, who at the time was managing Foreigner, which was not good for us really, because I think that the particular sort of model, for America was sort of Van Halen, Foreigner, those kinds of bands. And really we weren't like that, and we're never going to be like that, so it was unfortunate, that we sort of, I mean, I blame myself as much as anybody else for choosing that route, but management is important, but it's also important that they understand what you're trying to do.
Yeah, of course.
And, so in a sense, we ended up sort of being kind of pushed into a mold that didn't really kind of fit. So, didn't work. And, that was, not good.
You seem to have a roll call of different producers on those early albums as well. Was that a little unsettling and perhaps prevent you from seeking any sort of continuity in the band's sound?
Well, it was, and this is partly to do with the American management side, because the first two albums had been, well, the first album, there was really no producer involved, but it was just sort of done on the hoof, but the engineer in the studio was a guy called Steve Lipson, who I then asked to produce the second album, and which he did, and I would like to have had him do the third. But Bud Prager, thought that we needed a more high-profile and sort of successful producer, because it was, the 80s was a time when producers were sort of very much kind of seen as being very important. And so we had a little bit of a sort of thing on that, and eventually we chose Mike Howlett, who was, a successful producer at the time, for various different things. But, I think for continuity's sake, I would have much preferred to have stayed with Steve, who went on to become a very successful producer.
Exactly.
Funnily enough.
Yeah.
So it was a bad call on Bud Prager's part. He just said, well, no, we can't have that guy. He's just not a producer, and you just sort of listen to that stuff and you just think, well, who said so, Why? Not great. But, yes, I mean, those are the mistakes. I think that bands, when there's a bit of success, that you do get pulled into making decisions that you may later regret, because there is that pressure to succeed. Of course, everybody just wants, they all think they have the answer. In the end, the answer is really just the music, and that's really where what I would have preferred to have stuck with, and certainly have ever since. But at that time, there's a lot of pressure.
You ended up self-producing your own records in later years, and from all accounts enjoyed it. Perhaps had you had your time over again, would you may have sought to produce the Sniff and the Tears albums in those early days?
Oh, sure, yeah, absolutely. I didn't really have the confidence to do it at the time, but yes, I would, and I mean, I did. I did a couple of solo albums for Sonic Records in the '80s, which I produced, and well, the second one was co-produced with an engineer. But that was a very rewarding experience because going into the studio is not a business thing. It should be creative and enjoyable. So that's my ethos.
I read with interest a description of yours of a disastrous German television gig that you did, which I guess was you looked at as a last-ditch chance of reigniting the band's career. Run us through that, and do you believe the whole history of the band may have taken another turn had that night been a success?
Well, you never know. It's possible. It was an absolute disaster. It is one of those things. And this is this whole interview is sort of tending to accentuate the negative. But it was what had happened. I think we went out to do this. It's a very important TV show in Germany called Musikladen. And it was taking place in Berlin, and we just had a whole sort of catalogue of awful things happened. The main one of which was that the guitarist had sort of gone to the venue and forgotten his clothes, and wanted to go back to get them. Now, the sensible thing would not to have, would have been not to have gone back to get them, because he sort of hopped in the van and sort of quickly drove back, which wasn't too difficult. But not knowing Berlin at all, we got completely lost coming back. So we were late, and I think the other band that were on at the time was Dexy's Midnight Runners. They just had Come On Eileen, was a huge hit at the time, and we got completely lost, couldn't find our way back. And eventually we did find our way back in a complete sweat, and then got on stage very late, the audience kind of slow hand clapping. And then the guitarist got handed the guitar completely out of tune. and it transpired that the roadie that we had, we sort of taken a very kind of minimal crew, was no guitar tech, didn't know how to tune a guitar, so he was madly trying to tune his guitar while we were already into the second number, because there were, it was all very time, and it's in front of a live audience, and and so on. So it was just very unnerving and not good. And on top of that, of course, there were a couple of people there, ready to sign the band because we had. We were out of contract, so that didn't go down well at all, really. No, it was a night to forget.
Let's turn to a more positive direction. The last decade or so, you seem to be in a really good place, and probably making music now for all the right reasons that you probably wanted to back in the beginnings.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I mean, this is, yes, of course, and it's a bit late in the day to sort of start getting it right. But yeah, no, I mean, I'm really enjoying music at the moment.
Going back to your very first solo record, how ready were you at that time for a solo career?
You mean after the band, you mean?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I've never really, I've never really thought of I'm not a sort of a naturally kind of, how to put this. I'm not enough of a sort of show-offy kind of person to really want to be a solo artist in that sense. I mean, I don't I quite like the idea of having a band around, of people who, working together on something. And but it seemed like a good plan, and it was a great way, because of the backing of Sonnet, which was great, of going into the studio and getting some really good musicians around and making the record of my dreams, So that was good, and I'm still very, very, very proud of the two albums that we made, So, I think I would have been ready. We didn't tour, and that was probably a mistake. It was more kind of like put the record out and see what happened,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So, apart from experience, what would you say the more recent versions of Sniff and the Tears have the qualities that they've had that the original band probably didn't have?
More recent versions, you mean sort of in the last sort of 10 years or so?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think it's just been done on a much more kind of interested basis, if you see what I mean. I mean, when the original band was set up, it was, a good bunch of guys, but when you're young, your main ambition is not necessarily to the project; it's more to yourself, and so it was all about. It was all about kind of being successful, and it wasn't just about kind of the record. It was all about like, okay, well, what do we do next? And I think now, I mean, just making music with the only intention of making the best possible music that you possibly can, that's been great. And I've got Les Davidson, who is still playing the guitar, and guy Robin Langridge, who's a great keyboard player, and so everybody's in for it for the right reasons, I think.
Yeah.
And in that way, it's been a lot more fun and a lot more kind of meaningful, really.
And without the outside pressures as in the past.
Without the outside pressures, and of course the pressures you put on yourself. Just in terms of like, okay, how do we survive? You can see it in so many other people, so many other bands even from that time, that they go through all that pressure. And of course, some of them, sort of the same time as, we were around. I mean, we did a tour in Germany with Dire Straits and the Police and all these different people, and you could sort of see, you sort of look at the Police and you sort of think, yeah, they're going for it, they're going for the jackpot, they're sort of very, very intent and very focused in every way, and you could kind of see that. And Dire Straits seemed a lot more laid back, but they did it in their own way, and so that kind of pressure is there, I think, for everybody, at that kind of formative stage.
Does it bother or annoy you at times to see the one-hit wonder terminology placed upon you?
Well, I mean, generally speaking, I mean, in my mind, the association of a one-hit wonder tends to be a sort of novelty single,
Yes.
If somebody comes up with something that is just like, you sort of think, right, well, okay, well, I'll sort of, that's fun, but you don't necessarily think, well, I'd be interested to sort of see what else they do, because in a way that the one-hit wonder phenomenon is usually just about that particular track in a very specific way. And I don't see that with us, I mean, or with the band, or with me. I mean, a Driver's Seat is just one of the songs, and for some reason, and I've never quite understood why, it just sort of struck a chord, and people seem to love it. So, and I couldn't tell you why, really. But,
and just before I let you go, Paul, upcoming plans, what can we expect from you musically in the near future?
Well, I'm in the middle of doing an album which I'm really, really into, and it's going to be very different to anything that anybody's ever heard before from me, anyway. So that's great. I mean, I had a great title for it, actually. It was going to be called Random Elements, but unfortunately, I just noticed that Daft Punk had come up with Random Access Memory, and I thought, oh God, somebody else got random before me. But anyway, other than that, no, I'm really enjoying it. I think it's the best stuff I've done for a long time. So, yeah.
And that'll be under your name?
Sniff and the Tears.
It will be Sniff and the Tears.
Decided, yeah, because it's basically the nucleus of it's there of musicians that have now been working with me for a long time. So I think it is a band, really.
Fantastic. Well, we'll look forward to that. Hey, Paul, thanks so much for your time. It's been a pleasure to catch up with you. Congratulations on two great bodies of work, one musically and visually as well.
Thank you. Yeah.
And we look forward to that new record.
All right. Okay, great.
Great.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks again, Paul.
Bye.
All the best. Bye-bye.